Hello and very warm welcome to this special virtual roundtable discussion focused on how financial services institutions are modernizing data management. For the next 50 to 60 minutes, we are going to explore and learn from the top technology leaders from BFSI industry and how they are unlocking the potential of data, how are they migrating petabytes of data to the cloud, and how do they want to extend technologies and craft strategies around data management as data-driven lending and customer acquisition is growing significantly. To lead the discussion, today I'm joined by Mr. Ravi Krishnamurthy, President Operation and IT at SBI Life Insurance, Mr. Pinak Chakravarti, CIO Airtel Payment Bank, Mr. Vinod Kumar, CIO Fino Payments Bank, Mr. Saurav Tiwari, Chief Technology Officer at Policy Bazaar, Mr. Nilotpal Gupta, Head of Data Science Unit at ICICI Securities, Mr. Shuja Mirza, Director Solution Engineering at NetApp, and Mr. Akshat Balchandra, Financial Services Business Leader, Greenfield, India, Amazon. First of all, thank you all of you for taking out time for this discussion. And let me begin with Mr. Krishnamurthy. Sir, what are the most significant obstacles that BFSI organization encounter when storing and managing and processing data? Because you as a financial institution organization have access to a large set of data, and you do have, a different stream of data gathering and processing. So if you could share your experience. Sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So Jwale, as you know, SBI Life Insurance is a listed entity, and we are a very large or reasonably large organization, I would say, handling long-term policies of customers. So essentially, this means a lot of data storage needs and more opportunities for data analytics. And in the field of insurance, especially data analytics has a long role to play with respect to acquisition of customers, with respect to understanding and selecting life through underwriting processes, and then also the claims management, and then finally persistency and protecting the long-term persistency of policies. So that way, the use of data, the storage of data, and the analytics of data has a huge relevance in this industry, which I represent, because in this industry, it's long-term industry. And profitability essentially depends on how long we build our relationship with customers, how well we select lives, and finally, how do we service these customers and earn their loyalty for the long term. So in my experience, the way we have moved on data is finally, I think if you look at data, there are two types of data, structured data and the unstructured data. And that is where the issues, the challenges start with. Structured data is fairly easy to handle, but unstructured data, we are still very nascent in handling this. And if I look at the pillars of data management, I would say that the broad pillars of data management are, one is, it is finally, if you look at it, it is data privacy, data quality. I would say put it in this order. Data quality is the most significant important one, because the way you manage data depends on how well we capture data upfront, what is the quality of the data that we get, and how diversified is the data about the client. And then comes the question of how do we protect this data? How do we store this data? And then finally comes the usage of this data. This I'm talking about the structured data. There is a whole lot of unstructured data which is coming from social media, which is a bigger challenge in a very nascent industry of data management. I would say that the entire data governance framework of the country is at a nascent evolving stage, primarily because of two reasons. One is our privacy laws are still in the formation. So we do not know what shape it takes, what kind of regulatory frameworks come with respect to privacy. So in this industry, I would say that it is better at this point of time to take calibrated sure, small steps so that we are agile and flexible enough for the future. You take very strong steps and then the regulatory framework comes from nowhere. Right. And then you will have to do a lot of backward stepping. So it's my belief that it is better to start in a calibrated way and perhaps start cloud migration, etc., on a SaaS platform. Right. So you take newer applications and build it on SaaS platforms because that is where you have the agility. And on the past platforms, I think it is better to wait for the regulatory framework. How does it come about and blend it into the cloud policy? So a data governance structure and a data governance policy, I would say, is very critical for the company because it will involve all the aspects of quality, all the aspects of how do we store data, how do we use data, and finally, how do we protect data? What kind of organogram we have in a company to protect data? What kind of security arrangements do we have? What kind of hardware protection do we go for? And more important than that is, I would keep saying through the session that the future branding of companies is going to be based on cybersecurity.
Right.
Because one way or the other, the data security is going to come about and it's going to come about in a fairly rigid way. So we must be prepared for it upfront and build our security standards in such a way that the metrics surrounding the security standards, whether you call it cyber ratings or whether you call it KPIs, they kind of will give the confidence to the customer that, hey, this is a company with which I could share data.
Right, absolutely. I'll come back to again, before I go to Mr. Chakrabarti and Mr. Kumar, I'll go to Mr. Saurav Tiwari. Mr. Tiwari, Mr. Krishnamurthy was mentioning primarily what he was saying, you need to have a better visibility across your data. Whatever data you have, whether it is a structured, unstructured, fiduciary, non-fiduciary, you need to have a better understanding of your data. And then possibly on analytics, you can use it also if there is a law which is pending in the parliament. If it get fructify, you should be able to comply with that. Would you like to share some of the best practices and the technology that you have been leveraging at Policy Bazaar in terms of utilizing the data that you have, if you could share on that?
Yeah, I think it's very relevant discussion which I heard from Sir Krishnamurthy sir. In fact, that kind of tells that a senior person, how he visualizes the entire such a sensitive topic around data. So Policy Bazaar, I mean, it's a very different organization compared to SBI Life and other people who are from a different organization. We actually been little fortunate to born in the kind of cloud, right? So we have been using technologies which have been available in the latest form for us to consume. Our legacy is not that deep, right? So we have been very, very fortunate and been in industry for almost 14 years nearly. Some bit of legacy we have also started creating, and we started seeing some challenges around that as well. Like data fragmentation, data quality starts becoming a concern after some time. But the biggest challenge that always remains for any online player is the data security. I know, I mean, the data protection laws, etc., are going to be built, and things are in the at this time of time it is being formed right now. But when you look at the consumer's interest, I think it is very, very important for us to protect his privacy, and security is one of the most important part of it. We largely utilize cloud for storing data, and that's a fortune, I would say, because when we started our journey where the volume of the data started growing very fast, we started using cloud. And as we started moving ahead in our journey, we started realizing that we need data for every damn thing. Right. So our data storage is massive and it is growing at a very rapid speed. And it is impossible for us to store in a house setup, right? It has to be on a setup which can be expanded quickly. And so we chose cloud and it's been on the cloud. So some of the things which have been very important for us while we had been on cloud, first thing is security, for sure. And the security, not only by just putting up some kind of a physical security or appliances, etc. It has to be designed right from the time when you're designing an application or API. So these have to be thought through in the beginning. because access rights, etc., are very, very critical. You may end up actually sacrificing a lot of customer information, which you shouldn't if you don't design your applications right. So application design along with security became the most important part when we started moving our customer data to cloud. Second piece, which we believe is very, very important when anyone is thinking about cloud as a technology, is storage. It has to be a multi-tiered storage. And guys, I think it's very, very important for anyone to figure out, because data transfer is expensive. So what you're moving to cloud, what you're not moving to cloud has to be thought through. Once you are in the cloud, you have archived certain information, you're there. You're not going to come out from there so easily. So cloud has to be thought through in terms of what data we are moving to the entire thing. So one side is how you store data, another side is how you use data. Data security is very, very important. I think most important thing that we use data for is hourly, weekly, monthly, yearly reports and matrices. Plus, the entire data science operation runs on the data that we stored. And we do handle both structured and unstructured data. Because for us, any kind of a footprint that the consumer leaves on our portal or during the entire process of making a purchase of an insurance policy, or even during the cycle of claim or any kind of service that we are giving it to them, that should also be at one central place, and we should be able to build a full 360-degree view of a customer to give a complete understanding of a consumer while giving him a service. So that's the entire technology layout right now is existing in Policybazaar, and we've been building for last 2-3 years, and it has been a constant endeavor to service the customer without sacrificing the privacy of a customer.
Absolutely. Mr. Chakrabarty, I'll come to you now, as Mr. Saurav was telling that his organization is a kind of cloud-born organization. So therefore, the managing the architecture that he is referring to is a bit easy. And he has the kind of visibility that you would like to have. But there are organizations, for example, SBI Life Insurance or any telecom company, they would have invested huge money into the legacy architecture, and some of them might not be actually very prone to the cloud migration. So from that perspective, I would like to understand from you, what are the challenges and critical factors to consider when you are migrating data to the cloud, or maybe you are thinking in terms of experimenting with the cloud, certain portion of your database?
Right. I think it's a fantastic question, and some of which I think Saurav has already touched upon. And in fact, Ravi sir before also touched upon. So primary concern will still remain the security, privacy, meeting the InfoSec concerns, understanding what the regulation says in terms of moving into cloud, right? So as of now, if I look at the RBI regulation purely from banking, right, and ask a tough question of moving, let's say, my core banking to cloud, right? The answer is not very clear as of now, right? So obviously, I understand some people are experimenting with it. We are also looking at a few of the avenues. But as of now, given the regulation, I do not really feel that confident to move the entire the core banking where all the customer balances and everything is stored to the cloud. So approach that we have taken is that wherever the data is transactional in nature, that is the storage is ephemeral, meaning between two settlement cycles, let's say the data will decide. And then we can clearly demarcate what is the PII component within the data. We can apply the necessary encryption and follow the regulation around it. So for example, if I want to move the other wasted data, so there is a specific regulation about what kind of data can move related to other or not, right? So I think here the main challenges, I think Ravi sir also mentioned, understanding how the regulation will evolve around that, right? So we do not really want to overcommit at this point in time. On the other hand, we really do not also want to ignore the benefit that cloud provides, right? The other point, though it is not related to data, but let me quickly mention it covers the other aspects. The cloud basically provides us the benefit of flexibility, right? So for example, the day before yesterday, there was the PM Kisan disbursement, right? The direct bank transfer happened. So all of a sudden, there is a spike in the system. A lot of data came in, right? But this spike, we know very well, it will not happen, let's say, for a few months before the PM Kisan disbursement happens again. So these are the use cases where you see we all of a sudden have to process a tremendous amount of load on the system, which actually is far less than the average load. This possibly is a spike of 10x, I would say, right?
Right.
So these are the use cases which are by definition is suitable for cloud, right? But so far as the data element is concerned, once the processing is done, apart from, as I said, the transactional data and whatever you want to do after transaction. So in payment industry, if you say there are something you do pre-transaction, like you want to validate the transaction, you want to do the fraud validations and stuff like that, you want to check for the limit, then the transaction happens. But there is a set of things that you do post-transactions, right? So as of now, I think we have taken a conscious decision, a very conscious decision to look into the post-transactional data where we calculate our interest, the loyalties and stuff like that. That can move to cloud, right? But the typical core banking will still remain in our data center, right? Now, this is another interesting point that was raised by Saurabh, is that we need to be aware about the cost of data migration, and not only that, the cost of having a transaction being integrated between in a hybrid setup, right? So for example, if I have AWS data center, just taking a name to make Akshit happy, right? So let's say it is in Mumbai and our data center, let's say in Noida. So the moment you have this kind of a setup, there is a latency that is inbuilt in the system. So no matter how you architecture it well, this inbuilt latency you have to deal with. So I think when we move in, this kind of a thing we need to be aware of, that what is the inbuilt latency I'm building in. And then every transaction, if it is getting constantly encrypted and decrypted, that is another thing that you are adding in. Now you can argue that, okay, that is the software side, you possibly can make it as quick as 10, 20 milliseconds, right? But if you look at the data transfer between, just to give you this example, between Noida and Pune, that itself comes around 30, 40 milliseconds. So when customer is waiting and you want the transaction to happen in sub-second time frame, so this adds obviously to some component in that transaction processing. So I think we need to be mindful of that. The last point that I mentioned, I think it is quite elephant in the room that we do not talk about, right? So basically the data science that we are talking about, or the data engineering, having the data pipeline and stuff like that. So these are pretty new, I would say, in the financial services industry. My earlier employer, Amazon and others, they were slightly ahead in the game, of course, we know that. So for us to reskill our, the engineers, right, or to hire talent will continue to remain a challenge, right? So end of the day, unless data is converted into some sort of insight that will help you to do better operations, that will be able to do a launching of an innovative product, right? Unless you utilize that from the inside, then no matter what data you collect, that is basically not really that useful value addition for the business. Now, in order to utilize the data, the machine learning or the AI that we are talking about, right? So we are unfortunately, we do not have a lot of people who can claim deeper expertise on this, right? So I think we all are, the entire industry is in a journey path. So I think this is another challenge, and it will stay with us for a certain amount of time, but we really need to look at how do you build enough skill within the organization.
Absolutely. I think a couple of points that you have raised is quite structured, especially the core banking. The organization are struggling to migrate. The second thing you mentioned about the data science and the capacity that we have in terms of our ability to understand, do we have the right sets of resources actually, which can help us in terms of asking the right sets of the questions. And also, you mentioned about the AWS of the world. I know that Akshat will come on that. So I'll go to Akshat, but before that, I'll go to Mr. Kumar. Mr. Kumar, couple of things that Mr. Chakrabarti mentioned. One is the core banking, other is the data science, and the third one is a multi-cloud. But all these three are actual things that are going to be with any organization. Your IT infrastructure is going to be hybrid. So multi-cloud is a reality. You will have to deal with it. I mean, some of your application will be on-prem, some of will be in the public or private cloud, whatever you say, and multiple partners. And even if you look at the core banking, I believe 8 to 10% workload comes from core banking, and around 90% workload on your IT infrastructure is coming from the payment bank, APIs and all, with most of the bank. In such a situation, I would like to understand from you, if you have to modernize, let's say, your data, what should be an optimal strategy for a BFSI organization, given the fact that we have already discussed the challenges that we face?
Okay. Thank you, fellow panel members. And no, I need to extend what actually Mr. Pinak mentioned, because we are the same industry, and the kind of challenges that I face every day. So actually that's the way it is. The kind of transaction volume which he mentioned about right now. Last week of May, actually it's only 3-4 days, the kind of spike which we both organizations I think we have to face, and we have to transfer. Actually, that is the level of requirement of support that is required from IT services. Coming to your point, actually, I'm taking some of the points from Mr. Pinak and Mr. Krishnamurthy as well. How the banking industry actually working today. One, there are regulatory requirements, something which we need to follow. So where some of the things are not written, but the regulators may not be saying you can take cloud or you cannot take cloud. The moment you are taking to cloud, there'll be hundreds of questions or maybe thousands of questions coming from a security angle. The operational expenditure or to maintain those requirements or to respond to regulators is going to be a pain for the organization. The kind of amount that we need to spend to manage those will be too high. Same time, there are so many applications which you already inbuilt. The core banking systems are there. Around that, there are so many surrounded systems. We have the fraud risk management system, AML, ALM, the SaaS solutions, the recon. Hundreds of systems which are working. Those are required to respond in milliseconds. So actually, the kind of transactions that we run, like AEPS transactions and the MATM transactions, other things, the response needs to be so quick so that the customer can be served fast. That is very important to us. So like as you mentioned, the API is one of the great points, something which I need to touch upon. There are so many banks are integrated because the API become a big business for all the payments bank, especially. The kind of requirement is coming from some corner of India through some API partner going, and we are actually processing that for IMPS or UPI or any other thing, which is going to other end of the bank. Even if I am up and giving a very high throughput without much latency, the other bank may not be, giving the same throughput or same speed. So all of you are aware actually the kind of banks, the load on SBI or PNB. I'm just taking one or two banks' name for the sake of it, SBI and PNB and those kind of banks, the load. So many of the time, their latency or their speed is actually impacts our operation as well. So this one is from a hybrid point which I am taking from the seminar, that we have a lot of system which is in-house, and there'll be so many systems in cloud. And there are dependent multiple other organizations where the data is actually coming from, which fully required to complete the transaction. That became a very big challenge for all the banking, especially the payments bank actually go through that challenge. So from a FINO perspective, we made most of our transaction-based system, which is core banking system, and transaction-based system, which need to be responding in milliseconds. Those we are actually having in our on-prem because the integration is much easier and the response will be much easier. Third thing, I'll always say that one is security, everybody spoke, so I'm not touching on the security, but from a managerial perspective, we've had a lot of ease on this system because it's not one system, multiple systems actually we need to manage. So we found that much easier to manage the on-prem solutions on this kind of requirements. However, there are so many other systems which we don't require this kind of a response, especially the HRMS systems. Then we have many marketing solutions that actually rewards points. There are so many other solutions that is not require high throughput solutions integration. Those we actually keep on cloud. So we review the application, what kind of responses those applications is to be giving to operate to complete the complete transaction. Actually, we take a call and either it is on cloud or on-prem managed. So I'm taking one more minute just to add the complexity coming if I'm going to cloud. For me, especially, I'm not sure about the insurance segment and other segment, but from a banking perspective, we need to give every 6 months, we need to give a certificate saying SAR certificate. We need to give a system audit report, which is certified by a certain auditor, who needs to certify that the entire data, irrespective of customer data, or all the banking data is residing in India. This become a major challenge the moment I'm going to cloud. Yes, it is easy. They can actually do the assessment, give all the security and certification, etc. But the kind of pain that we need to go through, because that needs to be signed by not by a CISO or not by a CIO, that needs to be signed by a CEO or MD. So that is the level of expectation RBI, the regulator actually keeping there. So we found that the cloud will become a challenge to prove all this. We don't know where the data is and the kind of audit requirements that we need to go through. That is one point. The second point where I'll be coming, if I'm depending fully on the cloud, from regulatory requirement, again, all the banks, irrespective of payments bank, I think is applicable to any scheduled bank, we need to run the DR from the DR side 24 hours minimum. That to not on a weekend days or holidays. On a normal working day, we need to run 24 hours DR from different the DR side. Now, if I'm not keeping it on-prem and if I'm depending fully on the cloud, I need out multi-cloud solutions. Imagine the kind of pain that will be going through. So the kind of support that AWS is giving, the kind of I'm just taking another some of the cloud providers. It could be AWS, it could be Azure, it could be Google, or maybe controllers, or whoever it is. Multi-cloud will become a necessity for me. I cannot even imagine how we can run a DR 24 by switching from one place to one cloud to other cloud and then switching back to this cloud. And if there's a hiccup, and you know that how the banks are getting actually banks coming into media, we cannot afford that. So while from a technical perspective, from a aspiration perspective, we all support, especially I'm sure that most of the banks, we support cloud. We understand the cloud. We understand the flexibility what we'll get. But from a reality perspective, where the practical problems which is coming, I think most of the banks actually try to keep their core systems, especially the high throughput transaction system within the on-prem from all this kind of manual. Because today, if I want to shift to one DR to another DR, I don't know much depends because I know this system, this location, these are the identical scenarios and everything. When it is going to cloud, a lot of dependencies will be there coming in place. Yes, systems are technology is maturing. We'll also mature, and the time will come where all the systems can be into the cloud. The entire thing can be, and we'll be looking into that. At this point of time, it's a hybrid model. Core system in primary and secondary data center we have, and non-core systems what we are running for cloud.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Mirza, would you like to add, especially on the point what other speaker have spoken, that not all workload will go to the cloud. There are certain things which is air gap and has to be on-prem. So whatever you are taking to the cloud, as to how you can, you can apply one of the best technology in terms of the data migration and understanding of the data, and that can enable organization in terms of a better visibility leading to better policy or utilization of all those things. So if you could give your brief remarks.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. And I'll start with Saurabh's example. He doesn't have to worry about moving to the cloud. So, and this is fantastic. So see, the classification is a business decision, of course, supported by architects who would qualify that, what is the risk of moving these applications, or the perceived risk of moving these applications, and what precautions have to be, or checks and balances have to be put in place so that you can move confidently. And you would find being a geography like India, you have very, very good resources, both in service providers, the partners, as well as the hyperscalers or technology providers like us, where you would have people who would take you through that very, very seamlessly on the consulting side. Then while you move, is security aspects being discussed. I think Mr. Krishnamurthy, Pinak, Saurabh, everyone brought that up. Very, very important. And suddenly you are outside the four walls of the data center, and then the inherent, insecurity, you're exposed to the outside world, and how do you really protect yourself? It's not just the unauthorized access, but it's also the thing like ransomware threats, which are far more frequent than ever in these times. So how do you protect yourself? There's the 3-2-1 rule, which allows you to isolate your information, more so allow you to recover from such an attack very, very well. So back to the point of migrating confidently with in a very, very aware manner, knowing your risks, planning for the risks, and then making sure when you do so, you're very, very secure. And then you are able to get the biggest benefit of moving to the cloud, which is the rate of innovation. I think cost, we would come to cost and we would like to talk about cost, and it's a continuous endeavor that we keep driving down cost. And someone said storage. I think Saurabh mentioned storage and the volume of storage. With volume comes the cost also. And how do we really drive down costs on the storage side? It's a continuous endeavor. But more than that, it is very important that we give our customers the confidence to do business with us, and make it very easy from a UI UX experience. And that's where cloud plays a role. Right. So it's not a matter of what and which, but it is a matter of when, now. And I think industry is taking the step in the right direction. Moving to the cloud is imperative. Calculated, aware risks, mitigating them with the right checks and balances, and moving over confidently. Again, back to Ravi sir's comment, I think sure and small steps in that direction, is the right way to do so. Right. Once you are there, you should accelerate. Is what we're seeing.
Right. Mr. Akshat, would you like to share your view, especially around some of the points raised by our speaker in and around their challenges in terms of migrating to the cloud or exploring cloud, and what actually they can take? And then there is a cost factor involved in it. Also, what Mr. Kumar was telling, that once you go into the cloud, actually are going into in a heterogeneous environment altogether. So if you could maybe take a couple of points on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think very, very pertinent points made by all the panelists. Let me address. So even before we get into some of the issues, I think it's important for us to step back and say, hey, is data really a competitive advantage for a 21st century business, right? And I'm presuming all of us will agree data is going to be a competitive advantage if it's not already, which means our ability to harness data for the business, either for better customer experience or efficiency or really building new business models, is probably going to be relevant for every business in every industry, not just in financial services. Now, if this is true, I think the question that we need to be asking ourselves is, are we setting the right foundation for the business to be able to harness data, right? As someone said, data is the new oil, but I would go to the extent of saying data is the new renewable energy, which is going to power every business in perpetuity, right? Now, if at all everyone agrees to this statement, then the question arises, how do you set that foundation right? Right? We know we need to be harnessing data better. We need to be able to build better customer experiences using data. Then if you ask me today, so cloud, for example, AWS has been there for 14 plus years. A lot of other hyperscalers have come up in the last many, many years. And as we saw enterprises worldwide adopt cloud, pretty much we faced a similar question that was asked by all the panelists here, right? Which is, how will you put in governance in place? How will you move volumes of data? What about latency? What about data security? What about regulatory compliance, etc.? We've been working over the years to really help companies move to the cloud. And when I say move to the cloud, to Mr. Kumar's point there, absolutely, it is going to be a hybrid world for a long, long time to come, right? To be clear, which means we foresee even the biggest to the smallest organizations having footprints in their own data centers as well as in public cloud as well, right? And the transition will only happen over a period of time. At the same time, the pace of transition also will be determined by the business need of the organization rather than anything else. Now, as a cloud provider, what we've done is built a range of tools to be able to comply with the regulations that are needed in every geography. For example, I think someone mentioned about data sovereignty. You need to guarantee that data is in the country. That's really table stakes. What I mean by that is, if, for example, you start using AWS within India, that we contractually commit that the data will remain in India only. And that's frankly true for pretty much every large hyperscaler today, right? As far as security and compliance is concerned, what we've seen is, from a regulatory point of view, the regulator does not really mandate whether you should be using cloud or don't use cloud. They really don't mandate technology because they don't want to. They've never been in the business of really mandating a technology. However, what regulators say, and we've seen this pattern worldwide, is, hey, you've got to, as a regulated entity, you've got to adhere to certain security standards that we've defined, certain compliance processes that you've defined. Now, as a regulated entity, which is an FSI and the cloud provider, what we do is we help the regulated entity, which is the bank or the FSI, adhere to the requirements of that. For example, in India, as AWS, we've been here for about 5 odd years. It's been a journey. But today we've got banks running their LOSs, LMSs, CRMs on the cloud. We've got, for example, in the insurance space, we've got at least about 5 general insurance companies in the country today already running their core insurance itself in the cloud, right? Now, it obviously did not happen overnight. It's been a journey. They start off with workloads that will give them most comfort. And then gradually, as they start seeing value, as the foundation gets stronger, they start doing more meaningful things with the cloud and eventually possibly do more and more things and run major workloads in the cloud, right? So it's a journey. Now, to enable this journey, apart from security and compliance, I guess one area which all companies need to think about investing is really in skills, right? And skills has got 2 sides to it. I would rather, in fact, add a third dimension as well to it. One is really how do I retrain the people that we already have who, really acquired, skills over the last 20 years in legacy technologies. How do I enable them with the most modern technology that's available in the cloud? The second element is how do I also retain talent as I retrain them, right? It's important to start because as technology and data becomes more important, technology talent itself in an organization starts becoming even more important for you to be able to harness that. And the third element is really hiring the right talent as well into the organization. And most organizations, are already thinking about putting a strong foundation there. For example, as a cloud provider, we've got a lot of programs to enable companies to be able to, train people, reskill people, as well as we've even got programs where we train folks coming out of colleges to be able to enable them with cloud skills. But that's some of the elements that we are doing and the overall industry is doing to really build cloud skills as well. So I spoke about security. I spoke about setting up the right foundation. I spoke about skills. I think if you bring in these right input elements, you will gradually see organizations adopting cloud, or for that matter, cloud is really an enabler, right? To Shuja's point, it's really about how do I harness data better. Cloud is just one enabler. If an organization believes it can help them get there, they just will figure out a way to use it.
Absolutely. Mr. Krishnamurthy, I'll come to you. Most of his speaker, there is common thread, which is on the compliance and security part. I think most of us have spoken on that. And for even the technology leader within BFSI industry, I mean, one of the KPI that has turned out to be very important is aligning with yourself with RBI guidelines. So those are a huge tick mark for most of the CIOs in BFSI industry. So I would like to understand from you, given the fact that we have been experimenting with cloud and there are some element going, there are something on-prem. So so this is, and earlier Mr. Kumar mentioned about that on the challenge of having a real-time DR, not only from the cost perspective and also from heterogeneity perspective. But the fact is that the real-time DR in the future is going to be a reality because you have to be resilient enough. If tomorrow there's a sanction, you should have a path to come back, and real-time DR will enable you to do that. So I would like to understand from you, how do you ensure continuity of data compliance and deal with consent, privacy, and security related issue as an insurance firm on the go in real time?
This is why I mentioned about sure calibrated steps.
Right.
Because the way compliance is shaping up, it's also nascent. Some of the cyber technology, cyber security technologies that we are using are also nascent. So in a way, these things are also evolving parallelly. So my thought is that the first aspect is, of course, we mentioned about cost a lot on cloud. I wouldn't believe that. What I would say is that, what if we felt that the cost is too high, but then we can't scale up at all? For me, scalability is a bigger opportunity than cost is a risk.
Right.
So if the opportunity has to be seized, then I would like to see how I can become more agile. And that is why with the DR drills and the real-time eventualities becoming mandatory from the compliance, what I would do is I would take segregated steps towards cloud. So I would move certain applications to a SaaS-based platform, and I would buy new applications which are cloud-based. I would use more of applications after checking whether they have the ability to harness artificial intelligence. Because these are the things that will actually make data effective for me. Data storage is one part. Making data effective for me to build my future is more important. And for that, I have to understand the data stakeholders, apart from the consumer, obviously. Consumer is a big tick mark when it comes to data stakeholder interest. But there are several other stakeholders within the organization to which a CIO has to cater to. And his biggest challenge is, what do they need and how often they need, and real-time integration of their needs with the core applications. So what we do is we take front-ended applications, we take the applications which are handling, say, cash management or HRMS, and we move them first on an experimental basis to the cloud platform, or buy those kind of applications now on, which are upgrade versions of the old legacy applications to a cloud-based application, so that it is feasible for us to cater to them. The goal of any financial organization, much so for growing organizations, is how do you integrate from input to output in a seamless manner, so that we are able to give on-the-tap analytics capability, on-the-tap AI-based analytics capability to the stakeholders in the organization for effective usage of the data in order to move forward. And that's why it's very important, on one hand, to look at scalability as an option. The other hand is also that you build organograms within the organization. Organograms is what I say, what kind of data security protocols that you will have. If the opportunity has to be harnessed, the balancing factor is what are the protocols that you will have. For example, at SBI Life, we have a data security officer, we have a data protection officer. So in that way, in the human organogram also, we have sufficient assurance given to consumers that we have capable structures to oversee the consent that they have given. The most important part of the origin is the consent the customer gives to use his data. Now, any customer, is interested to know how good is this organization to use this consent effectively in a secure way without violating his privacy. And that is why the organogram comes in handy. Apart from the organogram, what we are also building simultaneously, we don't wait for the law to be passed in Parliament. We parallelly work on data classification tools. We work on data loss prevention tools. These are kind of middle things that we need to keep doing, because by the time the law becomes an eventuality, your framework of data governance is solid enough in terms of classification of data, in terms of loss prevention, in terms of cyber security ratings. So these things, you make it more formidable. So the moment you make that formidable, as and when the law comes in whichever shape, you have the organogram structure as well as the security structure is sufficiently robust enough. Plus the way it is governed at the board level or at a management level. Even we have a separate data security council. So these kind of multiple stakeholder involved councils help us to ideate on how do we take the opportunity forward for data usage in a way that is compliant in the future. So you become a lot more futuristic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Nilotpal, we have been talking about more and more around data and some of the challenges that we face in terms of migrating data to the cloud. And earlier, Mr. Chakrabarti also mentioned about the capacity building challenges that we face in terms of understanding data, asking right sets of questions to the data, creating the right pattern, which can actually help in taking the business decision. I think day in, day out, you deal with the data as a data science unit head. Would you like to share your views, especially around some of the challenges that we see in terms of the data management, which include a storage, compute, and management, also as well as our understanding of using high-end automation which I say the AI and machine learning, which is at nascent stage, as to how we are actually, utilizing those high-end automation for having a better understanding of data. If you could share your views, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll just take a step back and get to the point which Mr. Krishnamurthy stated in the beginning. While we, the technology has advanced, all of that, we store humongous amount of data, everything. But eventually, you need to be very clear what is the use case, what is the business going to do with that data, right? And how does that help, on customer experience, engagement, acquisition, retention, and customer satisfaction. So, and that's where it becomes very important that, what kind of data needs to be persistent versus what is not going to be persistent. See, the thing is, a lot of times we get, storage is unlimited, therefore just keep on bumping and store it for entire life. And then there's a buzz also that cloud is infinite. All right. So you keep on. So I think the point comes to me when I have seen the interaction with business and the consumer of the data and then making sense out of the data is that you need to have
I think we are facing some audio issue.
Strategy based on the problem that comes in that, of course, we need, right? We need. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So the thing is that broadly, any industry that you deal with, the classification of the data is into two kinds, transactional and demographic. You can, categorize that into many subsegments, so on and so forth, right? So it's like, how do we analyze transactional data and then relate to demographic and making a sense out of it? And that's where the entire data management piece comes in, that how do I organize my data? How do I, structure my data? And what kind of history we want to keep, for how many years we want to keep history and thereby get into archive. A lot of industries that is driven by regulations, and some cases it is some based on business use cases that we take. And then of course the point of security obviously comes in protection. The other thing is the field of data science is so evolving, right? And all of us are actually learning, because with the digital intervention, things are changing so fast, right? So how do we consumerize data, which the involvement of technology plays a big role, right?
Right.
Is it as we grow and the data becomes bigger and bigger and you try to help business? One of the things that we are kind of getting into with due security aspect and data management in place is to democratize data, right? What I mean by that is the data available in a very short time frame in the tip of the iceberg to the business, right? Because today's date, the business use case evolves so fast that every time a business has to come to analytics and data science for every small things, then by the time the data science team or the analytics team delivers things, the business use case might be over. So data democratization is a big thing that I see is going to take the digitization way forward, especially for the businesses to take decisions within the right security framework and data management. The other thing, because we have huge amount of data available, the importance of machine learning becomes more and more, right? See, the techniques of statistical modeling has not changed. You want to run a logistic regression or linear regression, you want to run that.
Absolutely.
But the way machine learning is helping, that today you are dealing with billions and millions of transactions and a huge volume of data, right? So the traditional way of doing modeling is not able to meet the expectation of business. So thereby the usage of the latest tools and doing machine learning models is helping get outcomes very rapidly to the business, because the tools and technologies that have changed, the computation power is very high. You are running these models in near real time. We are eventually getting into a situation when the customer is on the platform, you do a product recommendation to the customer.
Absolutely.
Because those days are gone when the customer came to the platform and then you got his data in some time and then you analyzed behavior and done. After 1 month, you recommend a product to the customer. The customer says, "Boss, I have taken immediately the next thing," right? So that's where the importance of machine learning has come in, and it's an evolving industry. As the situation today in the industry is that the demand is more, the supply is a challenge. So therefore, the skilling of the resources on right techniques and strategies and taking with them. The other thing is the RPA and automation has taken a big leap, because you are dealing with huge volumes of data. The days where, while technology came in, there was still manual intervention involved in processing of data, right? Lot of those things are getting automated through RPA and other things. And that is helping the operations sides of the world in an organization in a big way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you that what we need, especially to provide a delightful customer experience, a greater visibility across the data. And that can only happen when you have the integrated platform, a kind of console way of looking at to the business. And instantly decision could be taken if you have to do the upsell, that kind of thing. We are in the last leg of this discussion. We are almost touching an hour time. So we have just 10 more minutes. So I'll request each one of you to be quick, and I'll ask you a general question. Mr. Chakrabarti, what changes do you anticipate in data management over the next 2 to 3 years, given the fact that we are anticipating a new regulatory framework, which is pending in the parliament, and some of the other challenges that we have already discussed?
Yeah, so I'll touch upon the regulatory side of it. So I believe the regulation obviously will drive the data governance policies that I think Ravi sir and others talked about. What I believe will change, and in fact, we are also experimenting few things, right? So those policies will not be a document, a stale document lying somewhere. Rather, we will start automating those policies, right? And it's a bold step going ahead. But for example, there are few things which we are already automating. So for example, finding customers' PII data, right? So can a system find out the PII data automatically and tag it as a PII data, and then the policies around PII data will be auto-applied, meaning you do not have to go and say, well, this is the other number, and hence it has to be encrypted in a certain manner, right? All PII data will follow a policy and it will be auto-identified. The other point is the automatic tagging of the data. So right from the dashboard, which is visible, let's say in a call center, then going back into the data scheme, right, where database schemas are there, and back to the even to the column level, right? You possibly will be able to tag it all across, right? And then finding data lineage automatically, right? So there are tools available right now. We are experimenting with 1 or 2 where it can actually show us how PII information is flowing across the transaction. So once you auto-apply a policy on a particular data element, all the derived data from it will have the similar policy, right? So I think the automation, I think Nilotpal mentioned in terms of RPA and automation, though the context was different, but I believe in order to apply the the very complex regulation, we will see a lot of automation coming in the data management policies as well, right? The other thing, let me touch upon, which is obviously my favorite, is that, and again, I think Nilotpal touched upon this, 2 things here, right? So the data, looking at the staleness of the data, right? So if you look at the transactional data, you look at financial reports or balance sheets, right? These are always some event that happened in the past, and now you are looking at it. Now it will become more real time, right? And in fact, there are few things we are also trying. So when customers are coming and do something on our app, right? Can you understand what they are trying to do? And either if they're struggling there, for example, somebody trying to do a fund transfer and we see they are struggling, can we help them in the app itself when they are in the middle of the transaction itself, right? So frictionless journey, I think AI will become. So my favorite is this, that AI or data science, instead of being an elite organization doing something, talking about SBM, neural net, which nobody understands, right? Apart from them and few of us, right? It will become more available to everybody, right? Meaning
Absolutely.
at every stage of the business process, at every stage of the decision making, every interaction, we will use AI. So AI will actually become the foundation of the business. I think I'll stop here.
Right. Mr. Saurabh, would you like to add your views, especially given the fact that you are a cloud-born organization? So your maturity of maybe romanticizing with the cloud is slightly way at the other organization.
I was just thinking, because it might sound a little weird, but I'll just throw my views. Point number one, I think of course, I think data protection laws and bills are gonna be the part of our lives. It's very clear, because the way data consumption is growing in the industry, it's gonna be the part of our lives. And of course, data science, I'm hearing that it's picking up. I remember 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it was not the mainstream technology, but now it's mainstream technology. Right. And as I was just hearing some of the conversations, it's pretty evident that people have started using data to build intelligent products and solutions for better consumer experience. It is no longer a liability just that you're storing in your data warehouse. So that has tremendously changed in last couple of years, and COVID has kind of given a push, and we expect things to go a little further north, as Pinak was telling. And the third thing, which I believe, I'm just guessing, and I have a hunch, and this is what I'm seeing, I think the blockchain will become quite prominent. Right. The ownership and the control of the data will now start residing in the owner's hand. And I think that's a tremendous change that we are expecting in the next 3 years down the line. Right. That is bound to happen, because right now, you put your data somewhere, you don't have any control over it. But I think as the blockchain technology is maturing, I think this will become a reality.
No, you're absolutely right. I also believe if we are able to do some tweaking on our financial rule and business rule, blockchain could have a huge impact, because right now it's not able to become key part of our financial system, because the rule has to be changed by the parliament. Mr. Kumar, would you like to share your views? What is your anticipation in data management and some of the new things that you are expecting down the line?
So I think I need to extend what Mr. Pinak and Saurav said. One, from a BFSI segment point of view, most of the regulatory requirements, some or some other way, it is already there in place. We have our PCI DSS implementations, other regulatory controls are there. So a lot of controls are already there in place, but I'm sure that the DPL will give a lot of other elements that needs to be in line with maybe the GDPR and other recommendations, something which all the organization will have to move ahead. And everybody is, I'm sure that all of us would have built the foundation for that. We'll look forward to that and build accordingly, so that that will be secured and we can actually sleep peacefully in the night.
Right. Mr. Shuja, we also noticed, the gradual innovation in as to how we store data and process data. I mean, we went to the flash or something like that. So what is your assessment? Given the fact that we are generating petabytes of data every day, and the data is streamed, now that is available even in the public sector, and the bank financial institution is huge. So the possibilities of understanding, having what Mr. Nilotpul said, whether the regressive analysis or other kind of analysis is a bit high.
Sorry, yeah, I was hoping that you had something else beyond that. But yes, while you talked of all these initiatives and we discussed so much of digital initiatives, leveraging data for innovation, creating products, etc. Since I am from the technology side, I want everybody to please appreciate how much pressure it puts on us to respond to such demands. It is, back in the late 90s, it was, if somebody said a few MBs or few Mbps, it was more than enough. Right. Now, conversations with some of the telcos, I mean, few hundred gigabytes per second throughputs. That's the kind of, speeds and feeds they're talking about. And it is real. They're running it now. They want to run it in the cloud because it has all the niceness and coolness of running such AI workloads in the cloud. And they would need a storage platform on which, these availability as well as performance metrics can be supported. And it does put a lot of pressure on us, and we are absolutely, gearing up. We've already delivered some of these, and really looking forward to So again, that's one aspect. The other one is when it comes to regulations, it is in some sort of way, it does put pressure on us because these are data services which come from our platform. There could be third-party softwares which come and sit on your data repositories, but they could natively spring out of your data platforms or the data planes, as we would like to call them, and then complete the solution. It is important. We believe, at least I also support the notion that a bit of regulation, you decide the extent, but a bit of regulation is important for a safe environment. Right, is very, very important. Otherwise, imagine if regulations were not there, how would data be used or misused and thrown all around? It will defeat the whole purpose. Now, giving back control to the user, Saurabh mentioned blockchain as one of the ways of doing that. I think that is getting very, very real. So security, ability to pass on control to the user so that the user feels more comfortable. I'll again use the same term which I used, gives you more confidence of doing business. With someone who can pass on that control to you. You know where your information is stored, how is it being used, and is it being put to good use or is being used to service you better. If you get that, and that's where data storage platforms, the storage services, the security wrapper on top of it, all of it helps everyone. And this the innovation in this area will get accelerated.
Absolutely.
And across hybrid cloud environments. This is not going to be, Akshat from AWS. Hybrid is going to stay for a few years. Till we get to an environment where we could simply offload everything to an unknown and we can still consume services. But hybrid is going to be a fact of life. And therefore, it is important that these data planes stretch across the hybrid environments as well.
Right. I know it's a cliche to say that, data is a new oil, and earlier Mr. Akshat also emphasized that as to how the data has become very important, not from a perspective of single source of truth, but also offering the customer delight. Mr. Akshat, would you like to add in the end, especially around the data management part? And these can't be done manually. So you need a high end of artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities or high end automation capabilities to completely compliance with the regulation or a security challenges.
Sure. I'll just say three things here. One is, I think organizations will start proactively thinking about how do I manage the volume, variety, as well as velocity of data. It's so far been, most organizations have been reactive, but they will be proactive about it because it's going to be hard to predict those over the next many, many years. The second related point would be, for this to happen, they would have to start thinking about having common data management planes so that data doesn't remain in silos, but really it becomes a layer which not just technology teams, but business teams can leverage to really build innovative services. And it's going to be really more about exploring the art of the possible rather than absolutely knowing what kind of a service that you could build, right? The second element of this would be companies would try to think about how do I keep my data at the lowest cost possible. I think that trend will continue. Largely because if you want to be able to have explore the art of the possible, you need to start storing data at the absolute lowest cost you could ever do it. And the last point to that would be, from a security point of view, I think organizations will learn how to use the cloud to really improve their security posture and not just maintain the security posture, right? That's already happening worldwide, and we'll see more and more organizations figure that out, because once you crack that as a problem, I think your ability to do more with data will naturally get unlocked in every organization.
Right. Last word to you, Mr. Nilotpal. Earlier, you mentioned about the skill resources challenges that we see in the data science and which has been maturing with time. And what Akshat right now just said, the art of possibilities, and that art of possibilities can only be achieved when you have the art of asking right sets of questions, and you need to have the right, that is only doable. Would you like to share in terms of the capacity building and skills resources, especially in the data science and data management part? What is your assessment down the line in a couple of years?
I think, because this field is evolving, we are also, learning some of the new things that is coming. But I think there's no dearth of talent in India. Okay, it is about when the people come in, how they understand the business that in which the data science needs to be embedded in to solve the business problem, and the continuous tenacity to learn new things. Because thanks to open source, the way things have changed and changes very fast, technology is consumerized now, right? So the strategies that the organization needs to take is that you have to continuously invest on the skills of the people, get them trained on the latest tools and stack. And also it is important that they understand the business problem that they're trying to solve. Right. I think a combination of all of this is going to take us forward. A lot of organizations, we are hiring freshers because some of these technologies that are there are very new to the market. So you don't get people with so many years of experience of this techs, available in the market. So one of the things which we are doing is we are hiring freshers from reputed institutes and then training them on this stack so that it helps us, right? And the last thing that I think within the regulatory framework, probably consumerizing data and analytics is the future.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ravi Krishnamurthy, Mr. Pinat Chakravarti, Mr. Vinod Kumar, Mr. Saurav Tiwari, Mr. Nilotpal Gupta, Mr. Shuja Mishra, Mr. Akshat Balachandra. I think you all spoke quite well as to how financial service institutions are modernizing data management and some of the challenges that you face. I think most of you have spoken about the regulatory challenges, some of the anticipation that you have also as to how you can use innovation in data science in order to solve some of the business cases. And Akshat very eloquently brought as to why the data is important, why you need to start actually putting in place tools and technology in order to understand data. And it could be anywhere, whether it is cloud, on wherever you want to do the experiment, but you should start experimenting with it. So thank you so much for being such a wonderful speaker. Thank you so much.